You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, good to be with you all again for another episode, number 472 of the Mighty Blue podcast. As some of you know, the show is in a bit of a transition period with my book readings coming to an end, our Mighty Blue class of 2025 kicking into gear, as well as our regular main guests. This week, our main guest is somebody I've seen regularly on social media over the years. His name is David Allen Lane, otherwise known on the trail as Squarepeg. For several years, I've seen his Squarepeg's Trail Talk on Facebook, where he shares some of his experiences and recommendations to hikers. Now, I don't agree with him on everything, but I tend to agree with him on many things. For some reason or other, our paths hadn't crossed, so I was intrigued when I saw a new Facebook group and decided to call him to get him on the show. David will be on shortly. After David, we have Dave. Dave Santi shares the inspiration and motivation behind his own upcoming Appalachian Trail thru hike as part of our small but mighty Blue class of 2025. As you could tell from our conversation last week, Dave is detail-oriented and he has thought long and hard about this subject. I think you'll enjoy our chat. Then we have the second half of another chapter in Emily Leonard's book, Happy Hiking. This week, again, I've appreciated Emily's female perspective because I'm seeing things that I would never give a second thought to. This book is turning into a regular eye-opener for me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Between Dave and Emily, I'm going to be sharing with you some logistics that I'm working through to make sure that we can continue to speak with Dave and Beth while I'm away in Spain. And it's much more difficult than I imagined it would be. Listen out for that. So there's the lineup on the show today. But before we meet David, there's this. So we're in our 8th week now with TSX Challenge as a sponsor. And today I want to touch on a personal note about their people and how I've witnessed TSX grow. TSX Challenge leads inspirational backpacking trips through the Sierra, Grand Canyon and beyond for all ages and experience levels. And that alone should be enough to pique your interest. But I've been lucky enough to get to know 4 of their guides. There's Chris, obviously, who you've met several times in the podcast. He is so darn competent out there that he really puts any of your concerns at ease. When I went through the Sierras to Mount Whitney with them, I also met Dara and Ali. These are 2 remarkable human beings. They couldn't do enough for us, encouraging us, empathising with us, and in Dara's case, shaming me into taking a water slide on a rock. When I said I didn't think I was going to do it, she looked at me straight in the eye and said, "What, you going to do it next time?" And it was all I needed. And I will never forget that as long as I live. And then there was Ali. Ali is this ridiculously handsome, strong Italian guy whose main job was to record our adventure, but he was also always there to help in camp and on the trail. I love those 2. And I also spoke with one of their guides, Alyssa Woe, or Rainbow Bright, on a podcast several episodes back. Alyssa was young and widely experienced in a variety of different adventures, including the South Pole, with the North Pole as her next great adventure. Do you know, if they ever put the word badass in a dictionary, I swear you'd find Alyssa there. What a woman. Well, it seems that Chris and Alyssa have put their skills and interests together and are building excitement for a new experience in 2026. It's to a destination far to the north, on a remote island on Canada's eastern edge called Baffin Island. Now, I know an expedition like this likely isn't for everyone, though they say it's open to all willing to put in the effort to train, but I must admit, it's been so much fun to watch this company grow, and it's even more fun learning about places that I didn't even know existed. You can find more information about Baffin Island and get to know the entire TSX Challenge team on their website at tsxchallenge.com. And don't forget, you can get a 10% discount when you put in the code MIGHTYBLUE at checkout. None of this that I'm saying about TSX is untrue. Chris is sponsoring the show, but I've rewritten each one of the scripts that he sent me. So I want you to know that when I talk about these people, I think they are the real deal. Now, let's meet David Allen Lane, or Squarepeg, who is offering an interesting opportunity to people who may have thought that they could never hike the Appalachian Trail. Here's David. Today's guest is somebody I've heard of over the years but never spoken with. This is David Allen Lane, or Squarepeg. Hey, David, thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, the reason I reached out to you, David, was that I saw a post of yours on Facebook about a project you've been working on, but I'm going to talk about that a little later with you. But first, tell us how you started what appears to become a bit of a love affair with the Appalachian Trail over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Being raised in Maine and living 14 miles away from the Appalachian Trail, I had no idea it was there. I didn't learn about the Appalachian Trail until I moved around the country considerably and ended up in Colorado. I was in kind of a dead-end job before I didn't like the job, but I had some free time, so I spent time in the library where I learned about the Appalachian Trail. I was like, yeah, this is something I am going to do, and I made a promise to myself that I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail one day.
So where did you live in Maine before you moved out to Colorado then?
As a child, there's two cities in southern Maine. The southern tip is
Right.
Sanford and Springvale.
Right.
Then I've lived in Parkman and Bradford and also Alexandria.
All right. So you moved around. You still didn't know about the trail while you lived over there. That's quite something. How did you actually find out about the trail at the time? Were you looking at, because Colorado is pretty famous for its hiking as well. Were you hiking much in Colorado? You were looking for something else to do, or what actually happened?
I didn't have a lot of time for hiking while I was in Colorado. So I ended up spending time in a library. So that's where I found a book on the Appalachian Trail. And I started reading about it and information about it, and it just sort of captured my imagination.
So what was it? Was it somebody's journey on the trail, or was it a factual book about the trail?
Just a factual book and
Right.
the history of the trail.
So what was it about the AT that spoke to you so directly then?
Well, it seemed like more the kind of hiking that I like, because I've been up in the mountains in Colorado, and there's so much loose shale up there that it's just it's not very fun to hike up there. It's kind of dangerous, rock slides and stuff.
Mm.
And I loved going out into the woods and hiking in Maine. And it looked like the whole trail is kind of like that. So it was like being back in Maine when I used to hike the logging trails or horseback ride them.
I would imagine, though, as a Mainer, having hiked in Maine and New Hampshire and those last two states up north, you probably found the rest of the AT quite easy when you did it, didn't you?
Yeah. When you start going north, though, and you don't have your trail legs together, the southern mountains can seem pretty formidable.
Yeah, they kick your ass the
Until
first
you
few
realize
days.
And then when you realize when you get to New Hampshire that was just child's play compared to New Hampshire.
It's true what they say. Is it 20%? You do 20% of the miles takes, I think the last 20% of the miles take 80% of the effort. And it feels that way when you're doing it, doesn't it? Yeah. So, but you moved to Texas after Colorado, I understand, and you kind of forgot about the AT, even though you'd said to yourself you were going to hike it one day. What was it that revived your interest in the AT again?
Well, I moved to Texas and I got busy with life, got married, forgot about the Appalachian Trail.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2010, we went up to Maine to visit my brother. We took a long motorcycle ride from the other side of San Antonio all the way down to below Daytona Beach and all the way up to Maine.
Nice.
Pulling a little trailer. And we spent about almost a month on that trip. And while we were visiting in Maine, we went out to a little hiking trail to visit some waterfalls, just a short walk. And we ran into a hiker on the Appalachian Trail. And she was so close to finishing the Appalachian Trail. And it sort of reminded me that I'd forgotten that, I told myself that I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail one day.
Do you remember her?
That inspired me.
Do you remember who she was? Because she's the person obviously got back you to it.
Yeah, she's just somebody in passing. I didn't even get her name.
So you thought yourself you were going to have a go at it, and you told me that you were in Texas. But had you moved back to Maine by then, or did you actually go back to Texas and then go to the AT to start hiking it?
It was 2013 when my wife and I went out to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, I didn't know you'd done it with your wife. Okay, so Oh, hang on. That was your dream. It wasn't hers, I presume. How did you talk her into that then?
She just said she wanted to go. So she ended up spraining an ankle and had to go home in the Smokies.
Right. And did you carry on?
Yes. And when I started the trail, I weighed like 250 pounds.
Wow.
And yeah, my backpack weighed 70 pounds and it was like killing me. So after about 250 miles, I cried uncle and called it good for that.
So you obviously hadn't done enough research to get your weight down from 70 pounds. What do you actually have in your backpack then?
I had like a Sawyer water pump, and I had like multiple of like lots of stuff, like redundant stuff.
Right.
So plus I had a double sleeping bag. Yeah, it was not ultralight in the least. It was just like way too much stuff.
You carried that for 250 miles?
Oh, I started losing weight. When my wife went back, I was able to get like a single sleeping bag and get a lighter tent and drop the weight down quite considerably. Till I was probably about 50 pounds when I was, at the end.
So you, after 250 miles, you quit and you went home. Was it because it was entirely because of the weight, I presume? Had you actually been enjoying it out there though? I
was enjoying it. It was just like too much for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. How were you then when you did that?
That was I was 43.
Okay. Oh, still a young man then. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so you went back home. Did you think at that time that dream had passed? Or do you think you'd get another shot at it?
Oh, it just set my dream on fire to go back.
All right.
Because I fell in love with the community. And I just loved hiking.
So I presume then in the interim then, so you went again, I think it was in 2015. You missed out 2014, which was my first through hike year, funny enough. What changes did you make and how did you research what you were going to do to go out again for the second time?
I started watching YouTube videos and I started reading books like Appalachian Trials and a number of different books about hiking the Appalachian Trail. And so I started researching. I got better gear, lighter gear. And then in 2015, I set out to hike the Appalachian Trail again.
And how did it work out this time?
Yeah, I started on March 18th, and I spent 7 months on the Appalachian Trail.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a lot of zeros.
Did you? Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yes.
So what was your weight when you started second time then?
About 45 pounds.
That's still a lot, isn't it? I mean,
it was about 22 pounds base weight. And when I was full of water, like I had a 3-liter platypus.
Right.
And when I had like a full outfit of food for like a week, that would be about 45 pounds.
So tell us about the experience. What happened on this trip that made you really, because I know you stepped it up even further later on. So tell us about this trip and how it went for you.
Well, it was going really good. And then I got to right before the Dragon's Tooth, I think it was Catawba, to the shelter there.
Yep.
And there was a line of cairns on top of the hill that we were going through. Sure. And it was a wet day, and I was going down along the side of rock face like that, and I slipped and I fell forward and I landed on my forearm.
Wow. So what happened?
Yeah, about 6 feet. And it felt like somebody had taken a knife and stabbed me in the shoulder and then twisted it. And so I made it to the shelter, and like the next day or two, I was thinking I was going to go to Troutville to the festival and then go to a doctor and then get off the trail and go home.
Right.
And then it worse happened because I was at this one shelter. I think it was a Catawba shelter. And it was like early in the morning. I had packed up and set the pack up on the edge of the shelter. And I went to use the restroom. And when I came back from the outhouse, the pack was tipped over and the whole top of the pack was dumped out.
Oh. So what had you lost? Had you lost something? Has somebody actually
About
nicked it?
$1,300.
Oh, no. What were you doing carrying
Yeah, so I had-
$1,300 on the AT for then?
Well, there's not a lot of places to get cash, so
1,300 is still a
So
lot
I-
to be carried. Don't tell people that in
Yes,
the future.
it was.
But
That was a
don't
very
tell people
dumb
that in the
idea.
future. Yeah, don't tell people that in the future. So what'd you do? Because you said you were going to this festival in Troutville. You had your money stolen
Yeah.
from your back and you were injured as well. Were you intended to go home after the festival or did you think you wanted to carry
Yes.
on still?
No, I was planning on going home. And as I was heading down, I had to step off to the side of the trail to use the restroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I had immobilized my shoulder by putting my hand under my shoulder strap to immobilize the shoulder. And
Sure.
as I was trying to use the restroom, I slipped on some wet leaves, fell down and landed dead on that shoulder.
Oh, dear me.
Oh yeah, I get up and I was about ready to start saying some naughty words when immediately I noticed it felt better. The stabby pain was gone.
Really? You knocked
And
it back in
so
place?
Here's what I posited. I posited that I fell down, knocked it out of joint. And then when I fell down again, I popped it into joint so it felt better. I still couldn't raise my arm above like 15 degrees, like sideways.
Right.
I just couldn't lift it up. It didn't hurt, but I couldn't lift it up any higher.
Jeez.
But I could still do the hiking pole thing, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
could still use my hiking poles as normal. So I figured it was just going to take some time to heal up. So I was still planning on going home because I had like $500 or $600 to hike the whole trail with.
Wow, wow.
So I get there and some of the hikers had heard about what had gone on. And one of the hikers came by and he just dropped me a $50 bill.
Nice.
And he says, I hope this helps. And another one had heard about it, and she started a GoFund account for me
Good Lord.
and raised me like several $100s.
Wow.
And so I was able to, it just sort of lit a fire in me, that, I'm going to come in, I'm just going to go this until the wheels fall off of it.
Yeah. You must have still been doing it pretty cheaply then at that stage. You said you took a lot of zeros. You probably couldn't afford to take too many zeros after that because when you go into town, you hemorrhage money, don't you? It just flies out of your pocket, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I was able to do work for stays. And as I was doing work for stays, I'd be
Nice.
able to raid the hiker box and get a full resupply. And I was able to do some odd jobs along the way. Like a particular place in Greenwood Lake, New York was one where I spent like a week and a half tree trimming. And that replenished everything up pretty good.
Jeez.
I'm skilled at tree trimming. So I was able to do some jobs along the way, do work for stays. So when I was in town, I was able to get my hostels, and I cut my, my groceries down by raiding hiker boxes and then just getting only what I needed.
Do you know what? That is true hiker trash fashion as well, isn't it? Really, it's the perfect way to do it. Really, yeah. But in fact, when you were back home, am I right in saying that you had an MRI and the damage was worse than you'd imagined?
Yes. When I get back, my shoulder kept popping occasionally, and it would feel like I got stabbed. And so I was like, I have to go and get this checked out. So right before Thanksgiving of 2015, I went to see the doctor's office, and well, I surprised the doctor. And you never really want to surprise the doctor.
No.
Because he was looking at my x-ray, and before he can, contain himself, he was like, oh my God. So I was like, that's not good. You never want to hear your doctor say stuff like that.
No, oh my God, so good.
I had ripped, what happened was I had ripped the rotator cuff muscle of my left shoulder almost completely off the bone. So it was being stretched.
Wow.
And that's why it felt so horrible.
Right.
And when I fell again, it ripped it completely off the bone. So then it wasn't like under stress anymore. So it felt better.
But it wasn't really. So what happens then? So can they reattach the muscle? What do they do?
Yes. What it was that they were able to. He told me if I'd waited any longer, it had atrophied almost to the point where he couldn't reconnect it.
Good Lord.
So, yeah. So he went in And right before, like, December 10th, so that lets you know how fast he got me in, so right before Thanksgiving. So he
Sure.
moved people out of the way to get me in there. And on December 10th, I had they attached it back. What they did was they went into my shoulder in the clavicle area. They hollowed out that area underneath there.
Right.
And then they put the muscle back in there and they attached it with sinew staples and screws. I assume they're titanium screws.
Right.
And then I had to have like this cast on my shoulder, and I had to sleep in a chair, a recliner, for like a month.
Oh gosh. So how was it? But when it recovered, I mean, did it recover? Did it mend completely, or do you still get pain from it?
It was completely recovered.
That's amazing. So you went back home, and by now you'd obviously you'd really fallen in love with the AT. You wanted to carry on seeing it again. How many more times have you been on the AT since then? And how many times have you actually completed it?
Well, when I was like recovering from that, I got an invitation to join the Hiker Trash Trail Association, which was a little volunteer group.
Right.
And they asked if I would come hike the Appalachian Trail with them in 2016.
All right.
I figured that'd be a good way to do rehabilitation, is to go hiking.
What did your wife think about all this? Keep going back to the AT.
She did not want me to go back to the AT. She was not willing to go back with me. So
Right. Okay. Well, but you still did. Okay.
And I couldn't really go back to work because of my shoulder, because I drove. So I'm an Uber driver, so I couldn't really drive with that shoulder the way it was.
So am I. I do that as well. So is that how you fund this? Because going on the AT is not a cheap gig normally, is it?
No.
Because if you go on the AT, do you spend less than most people now?
I do. Probably one of the reasons is that on the trail I make my own meals.
All right.
So, yeah, and I make them very affordably.
Out of stuff you find?
No, most of the stuff I get at the grocery store.
All right.
But I get like Nor pesticides, and then I add stuff to them to make them better, or oatmeal, or I'll make my own trail mix. So my grocery bill is like $100 a week.
All right. So if you do this, you now go quite regularly, don't you? You have been quite regularly, rather, over the years.
Yeah.
How many times have you completed a through hike, and how many other miles have you done on the AT?
Okay, in 2016, I went and joined the volunteer group.
Yeah.
I carried a small garden shovel with me that was probably about 2.5 feet long.
All right.
And I cleaned out fire pits on the way.
All right.
And I picked up trash. So I hiked it in 2016, and 5.5 months is what I did in that one.
Right.
And
so
then,
hang on. So along the way, because I took note of this, you got a stick and you were pushing down the outhouses, and you don't mean the building, do you?
Yeah. There was a couple of outhouses that were like overused, so that the fecal matter was like getting close to the top. I'm talking about within like inches of the seat. So what I did was I went out and got a good size branch, maybe 3 or 4 inches, maybe 4 or 5 feet long. And I would just start pushing down in and like packed it and moved it around off to the sides to like drop it down several feet to make it useful again.
Man, you're a true trail angel, let me tell you, for doing that. So why do you keep doing this hike? Does this hike not make you want to do others, or is it the AT itself? Is it the community? Is it the trail? What is it about it that keeps bringing you back to it?
The community. Texas is as close as I've come to being like the Appalachian Trail, where the people here are just generally friendly.
Right.
You just walk up to a random stranger and start having a conversation with them. That's the way it is on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
You walking up to a random stranger and having a conversation with them is like normal. Within 5 minutes, you're like telling your life story to a stranger, or them you. You just make connections quickly out there. And the people along the way in the towns and stuff that like come out to support you. I mean, I remember one time I was going through Great Barrington up by the up in Massachusetts.
Right.
What's the Berkshires, right? Is that the fancy place up in Massachusetts?
That's right, yeah.
So I was like walking along the road. I was not even hitchhiking because I was smelly. And this $250,000 BMW Sportster pulls up beside me. The trunk opens, and the guy says, "Get in the car." And I'm
Not in the trunk. He didn't want you to
beautiful...
hang on. He didn't want you to get in the trunk, did he?
No, he wanted me to put my pack in.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Dude, I am not getting in your car. I stink. I'm dirty." And he looks at me and he says, "Dude, I'm a hiker. Get in."
Do you know, that's great. That's great that somebody would do that in a big car. And frankly, and totally expected. I'd feel the same as well about somebody, a hiker as well, knowing that you do the best you can to keep clean, but it's not that easy, is it?
Yeah.
So were you, I did this, as I say, I've done this twice, and through like twice. I've been on there a few other times as well. Do you find you take different things from it each time? Because I'm often asked, why would you want to go on a trail a second time? But I found my second trip was totally different to my first trip. Do you find something new every time you go on a trail, on this trail?
Yes. Every time. It's like a totally new experience. It's like a totally new trail. You'll stay at different shelters, different campsites. Your hike does not match up to the last one. And you're constantly meeting new people. So it's like every trip is like a completely different journey. And like the people you meet along the way, like I was out in 2015 at the Carter Gap shelter, and I heard the bionic woman was going to show up. She was the lady that when she was out rock climbing up in Colorado, she fell 40 feet onto rocks, shattered her leg. I mean, she just got all busted up. She got recovered. She had her leg amputated below her knee.
Jeez.
And 18 months after her leg got healed up from getting the prosthetic fitted and everything, she decided she was going to come out and hike the Appalachian Trail and become the first female leg amputee to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
She was like an inspiration for a whole year that year. I mean, that was probably the reason why I just decided to like walk off a torn rotator cuff, because I was like, if she can do this, I can do this.
That'll do it, yes. Somebody else's pain is always going to be worse than yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just before we get on to the reason I contacted you in the first place, where did the name Squarepeg come from?
Well, in 2012 or 2013, we had to go back to the hostel and in Dahlonega, Georgia, the hiker hostel.
Yeah, I know.
And that was when my wife first like sprained her, she twisted her ankle. So we went back there, and I was sitting across from a doctor from Doctors Without Borders. And so we started sharing stories. I mean, he shared stories with me about how he was in the jungle down in South Africa. And one time he got chased by gorillas with guns. So, yeah. So he was telling me all these crazy stories, and I started telling him about what it was like growing up with ADHD in Maine, how difficult it was in school. I mean, look over there. There's a squirrel. So
that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
So you felt like a square peg in a round hole, did you?
Yeah. So that's how I said, so basically my story was I was the proverbial square peg that didn't fit in a round hole. Yeah.
Do you feel that you talk about community? Do you feel that you fit on the trail then?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
That's what feels like home.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, let's get into that reason why I contacted you. Tell me how Slack Pack the Appalachian Trail with Squarepeg came into being.
Well, I'd done, I got distracted earlier, but I went out in 19 to hike the trail. Mm-hmm. I had hiked all the way up to Greenwood Lake, New York. I had to get off due to an ankle injury.
Right.
So I came back in 20 all the way to 23. So I've been on the trail. And I'm having like more and more problems with my back and stuff.
Sure.
And last year I was rear-ended 3 times while I was driving. Like the first one totaled my car.
Wow.
So I'm realizing that I'm not, carrying a big heavy backpack just isn't in the cards anymore. So I had to do something different. So I came up with the idea, wouldn't it be great to slack pack the Appalachian Trail? And I figured if I was the same way, I'd talk to a number of people. They say, I'd love to go, but I just can't tote a big, heavy backpack anymore.
Sure.
So I decided that I ended up buying a bus, a 15-passenger bus. I just got a tow hitch put on it. And I'm getting ready to get a camper. So I'm just waiting for all the paperwork to go through.
Okay.
And what we're going to do is we're going to hike the Appalachian Trail. It's not going to be pure slack pack because there's not enough road crossings all the way.
Right.
But it's going to be like a modified slack pack where we're going to leave all of our extra food, clothing, and gear on the bus so that our backpack weight will be reduced greatly.
Sure.
And then on the days that we have multiple road crossings, like at the beginning and end of the day, whenever we can, we'll just drop our backpack off with the bus and we'll get a day pack and do as many day hikes as possible.
So that setup, and you're the one hiking, but the setup...
Yes, I'll be leading the group.
Right, the setup you're talking about then, that involves a driver, I presume, and other people to help.
Yes.
Is that right? So what is the setup so far?
So far, I have one dedicated person that'll be driving the bus.
Right.
And I'm getting the final details on, getting payment set up. So, and within the next day or two, I'll figure out how many exactly are going when I get the deposits.
And what's the response been so far? Is this because, I looked at, and the reason I'm asking is I kind of know part of the answer. Some people are looking at this as a way in which they can do a significant amount of the trail, like a section really, as much as anything, because and people are saying, well, I probably couldn't have done this by myself, but I could do this now with this effective slack pack. Is anybody going to come all the way from Georgia to Maine with you, do you think?
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 that are.
Oh, really? Okay. So, and when we spoke before, you told me the cost. And at the time I thought, that seems quite a lot. But now that I've seen what you've lined up, it seems far more reasonable. And it's, I think it works out about $2 a mile, doesn't it? Something like that. I think maybe that's so when people sign up and join up, they join you on the walk and the clock starts ticking at $2 a mile, which makes sense. What is your plan as a hiker? Are you going to do hostels? What are you going to do within this?
Well, one of the things that support person can do is they can go out ahead and make reservations for us.
Sure.
And we might can get cabins and get a group rate at cabins.
Right.
And get a hostel situation set up, while we're still on the fly. So that way we'll have reservations waiting for us. So I'm probably going to do mostly hostels whenever possible.
And have you had people reach out to you who've never done this at all and think this is the answer for them? Because if they've never done it and they just couldn't face the idea of toting a bag up mountains and so on, is this the sort of market you're trying to go for?
There's going to be some of that, yes. But the ones that I was looking for was the people like myself with some limitations that have had a dream of hiking the Appalachian Trail, but just thought it was out of reach.
And when does this all start?
We're set to go to the Appalachian Trail kickoff on February 28th to March 2nd.
All right.
And then on March 3rd, or maybe March 4th, we're going to hit the Appalachian Trail, depending on the weather.
And with your experience of hiking, you can obviously help people sort their packs out and help them. It's going to be quite a responsibility for you, isn't it? Are you ready for that?
Yeah. I've met some friends up at Mount Katahdin and hiked with them through Maine. So right. I've done it on a smaller scale before where, sharing tips, hacks, and advice along the way to make their hikes easier.
Sure. And it makes sense. You've got all that experience. People will get a lot out of this as well. So how can people get involved then and perhaps reach out and want to do it, who might want to do it?
Well, there's my page is called Slack Pack the AT with Squarepeg.
Yeah.
And that's the page for the group where people can sign up.
Right, because
I'm
going to include that in the show notes as well, and I'll make sure this conversation goes out prior to you starting on the 28th of February. Well, you know what? I wish you well. It's a novel idea, and I know some people have tried to do a number of different groups and so on. But so people need to think along the lines of $2 a mile is really what they should be looking at. I just wish you well in it, and I hope your back holds out to make sure that you're okay as well on the trip. And I thank you for coming on and sharing the story with me.
Well, I just spent like a little over $1,000 to buy a Z-Packs tent and sleeping bag.
Have you?
And the tent and the sleeping bag from Z-Packs, the two of them weigh like 1.45 pounds.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
That's like that's less. That's like half the weight of my tent, my Big Agnes.
Yeah.
I mean my Big Agnes Tiger Wall. It's like half the pound. So it's like a quarter of what I had before.
It's remarkable. My tent in 2019 was about my backpack in 2019 was a fifth of the weight of my backpack in 2014. So it's just the way in which weight is coming down is remarkable. But all I can say, man, is I just wish you well with this. It's a great idea, and I just hope it goes well. And once you've had the first season, as it were, and you've done it, come back on the show and tell us how it went. Okay?
Will do. And for those looking to get into long distance hiking, I have a hiking advice page called Squarepegs with apostrophe S. It's one word, Squarepegs Trail Talk. And that's where I share all my hiking advice, tips, and hacks of everything I wish I would have known before I did my first through hike.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, man. Well, look, that's where I saw you before, actually. It was on the hiking advice tips. So I will include that link in the show notes as well, okay?
Thank you so much, and have a great day. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Take it easy, okay? Cheers.
Yep.
Bye. Well, you got to hand it to him. He loves being on the AT, and he's putting together a group of people who share that passion, even though they thought they may never have the chance to experience it. I'm all for as many people getting out there as possible, limitations and all. And in this setup, you can imagine people doing, say, 100 miles of the AT, and that can never be a bad thing. Best of luck to him, and I'm going to be fascinated to find out from him later in the year how it's gone. Before we move on, my heartfelt thanks goes out again today to our wonderful donors. The people I want to thank this week are monthly donors Todd Withrow, Galloway Johnson, Suzanne Johnson, Betty McInerney, Michael Garsh, Anne Pickin, Sean Deadwiley, Sharon James, Kevin Weidman, and Emmanuel Bravo-Ramos, while our lovely friend Dr. Lynn also sent a generous donation. Thanks to all of you. You know how much it means to me. I've had several emails during the week reaffirming how much you enjoy our Mighty Blue class section, and we move on to the second pre-hike chat with Dave Santi. Here's Dave, or Freebird. So we're on again with Dave. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Good morning, Mighty Blue. It's a lovely morning and getting closer and closer and very excited to get going.
You sure are, aren't you?
Yes.
Now, have you changed any of your gear since last week?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, blimey, it looked like you were thinking about that one.
All my clothes are gone right now. I sent them off to be insect treated through this company called Insect Shield.
That's right.
It's supposed to last like 70 washings, so I'm crossing my fingers that I don't have to leave for the trail naked. But
there is no possibility you're going to need 70 washes on a 6-month hike.
No, of course not. But at least I don't have to worry about washing and reapplying the treatment. So it'll be back this week. I'm not concerned. Yeah.
So we're going to be talking today about both inspiration and motivation. Let's start with the inspiration to do this trail. And I know that it's mainly your dad. Tell us about him.
Well, that's a good point. Yes. And it's funny, as I thought about this episode and was kind of putting my own thoughts together, it really dawned on me that my dad is the inspiration and the motivation for my going. My dad was an Italian immigrant, came over from Italy when he was 22 years old.
Sure.
And we grew up in the Bay Area. My dad was very much into hunting and fishing and outdoor activities. His uncle, who was already here, but another Italian immigrant, got him interested. And by the time my brother and I were 5 or 6 years old, we started fishing and camping. And we spent a childhood of growing up camping and then fishing. And then as we got a little bit older, hunting as well. And so Dad was always taking us into the woods. Now, let's be clear. He wasn't a backpacker. He wasn't a hiker. It wasn't his passion. But being in the woods and being outdoors was where it started with him.
Did he know you? Did he know that he was developing a passion in you for that sort of thing?
I believe so. I mean, my brother and my father and I, we did all these things together, and everything that was part of that passion became sub hobbies. If fishing, it was the equipment, and we started making our own fishing poles. You could make your own kind of stuff. I mean, so he was very much a doer, a fixer, a maker, a person who could create and do anything. And so anything we did as a larger hobby, he also worked underneath in the gear and the equipment and instilled that passion in me and my brother as well. And so, I've grown up to be very much a doer, a fixer, a maker of things. And that's why I'm so gear obsessed.
Are you going to take a fishing rod with you?
I am not. It's a good question. It's just one more distraction, shall we say. Plus, there's a lot of local requirements, fishing licenses, permits, things that will change state by state as well. I'm not going to.
And what about? Do you know but the flora and fauna? Do you know that sort of stuff? Having been in woods, because I always feel guilty when I go on a long trail that I don't know this stuff. Because I know that some people would walk along, they'd be picking up ramps and they'd be cooking them that night, or wild garlic, and added that to their food. Are you that sort of person as well, or you're about as foggy about it as I am?
I'm about as foggy as you are.
Oh, right. Okay.
The one thing that we did do on the West Coast growing up is go out for mushroom foraging in the fall, but only one specific. It's the porcini mushroom. It's the same one you'd find in Italy. It's the same delicacy you find in the restaurants, and they're really easy to distinguish if you know what you're looking for. Aside from that, a tree's a tree, a bird's a bird. My wife loves bird stuff, and she made me install an app that will distinguish bird sounds if you
That's
hold
a good
it up
idea.
there.
That's a great idea.
Listen for different birds, so I'll go along with that.
I'll give you a little warning. You tell me if I'm right about this. I know that when I went through, you go through these forests, and they're massive forests, but there are certain little sections of woods where sometimes it is completely quiet. You think of the birds gone holiday or what? It's incredible. It just and I'm suddenly get unnerved by this, because I think if they're quiet, there's normally a reason for it. So
they're afraid of something, right?
Yeah, you watch it. You watch out. You'll suddenly be going along and think, I haven't heard a bird for a while. It's kind of weird, I tell you. And I know you mentioned before that you were in the Boy Scouts, and your father went along with that as well, did he?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, my brother and I were in the Boy Scouts in the mid to late 70s. We did a lot of outdoor activities, the usual stuff you'd expect with the Boy Scouts, camping, overnight activities. We did a snow camp a couple of times, which, given the state of the gear we took in the 70s, it's a surprise I'm still alive. We did a couple of summer camps, and my dad was involved. He became the assistant scout master as well. So that was my dad's nature. If we were doing something, he would kind of get involved, but within his own parameters, right? I mean, in the sense that, like, in this sort of, growing up with sporting events and playing sports, he wasn't that interested. And so my brother and I played sports, but he wasn't like always on the sidelines. And that's the 70s too. Things were different as well.
Sure.
But the things that he was interested, that we were interested in, he jumped in full bore as well.
So he kind of gave you this love for the outdoors, and the idea of actually living alone in the woods wasn't fully formed by that stage. Tell us about the TV show that added onto that adventure lust of yours.
Well, there was a show in the 90s called the Eco Challenge, and I think it was a precursor to all the Survivor-esque type shows, which to me are just more of a put on. I mean, it's more about the drama and the stupidity than it is about the survival aspect. But the Eco Challenge came out in the late 90s, and I'm pretty certain it was the same producers who did Survivor and some of the other shows. And there were teams of 4, and it was a race of sorts. And each team was required to have a woman on their team as well. So it couldn't be 4 men. it could be. I think it could be for women.
That sounded very patronising, by the way. Not by you, but perhaps by the producers of the show.
Well, that's it. It was the producers. Yes, it was the producers. Maybe being patronizing, desire to at least. But I think what they were trying to do is encourage women to be involved, but therefore, what they would, I guess, feel is balancing things out in strength and capacity. Sure. But I don't think it was quite necessary. I think the women were far stronger than anybody gave them credit for. It was a great show. I don't know if it lasted more than a season or two. And I would watch the show going, this is fantastic. I mean, but it was also extremely hard, much harder than anything you do on the AT and all that. But I was like,
what were they doing?
Well, it was a multidisciplinary, if I remember. So I think there was swimming, things like that. It wasn't just move yourself from point A to point B. And it was very grueling, shall we say, because it was a timed event, or it was a race.
Sure.
So it wasn't,
right. Okay. Right.
And I had this idea that one day I'd love to do it. I even had my sort of team of 4 picked out. Not that anyway, it never became of anything.
Hang on. You had a team of 4 picked out.
It just understand. No, it's just like, you're going on an adventure. Who would you take with you? Right.
Okay. I got that.
It was just that kind of sense. Right. But nothing came of it, of course. And it was just this interesting inspiration you see and things,
And then in the early 2000s, you had you and your wife had your children, and you've been bringing up your family. I guess a lot of people say life got in the way, or the kids came along, so I couldn't get away. What was it that revitalised your interest then? Because I imagine that as your father had been a hands-on father to you, and had been with you and encouraging your dreams, I'm sure you were doing the same for your daughters as well. What was it that suddenly revitalised the interest in actually doing something like the AT?
Well, there was a couple of things. Certainly, being involved in the girls' events growing up, they were very much involved in sports. So, in opposite sense of my father, I was a coach a lot. I did a lot of coaching. I was involved in a lot of sporting stuff. But there was a lot of a number of outdoor activities that they would be involved in, overnights with the school that I went along with, and that's kind of started a little bit of it, these nature adventures and things like that were so much fun. But around 2015, a friend of mine had been section hiking the Pacific Crest Trail for a number of years, and he was telling me about it, and that little spark went off in the back of my head, reignited some thoughts I'd originally thought of the AT in the 90s, but didn't really pursue it for, I'd heard about it, but didn't, the 2000s came around, the children came around. So the idea of actually being able to get away for 6 months,
you probably think at that stage that the window is closed, don't you, as well? It's funny, actually. I know a lot of people say they put it off and they kept putting it off, and then they don't do stuff. There has to be something that makes you actually really get that passion back in again. And so for you, it was your friend hiking the PCT.
That's correct. In fact, since he was section hiking, it gave me this new insight, this window. Like, wait a second, you don't have to give it 6 months. You don't have to drop your life and go away, especially with kids. Kids are only 15 or so at that point. This idea of section hiking was like, bang, that's what I'm going to do. And I really got excited about it. I started doing a little bit of research. I read Wild, which because it was PCT based, it's just, and a bunch of other books at that time. And I started planning it out into about 2016. It didn't come to fruition. 2017 brought some health issues with me. And while it didn't particularly prevent me from doing what I'd want to do, like a through or a section hike. Sure. It sort of scrambled up life for
Tell us about
that.
While. What actually happened? You said it's 2017. What happened?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Fairly aggressive. So a reminder to all the men out there that as soon as you turn 50, they're giving you these PSA blood tests. Yeah. The very first one they did for me when I turned 50, it was actually late 2016 when the first kind of numbers check was a little out of skew, and I kind of ignored it and like, whatever. But then into early 2017, the doctor's like, they did some more blood tests and a biopsy, and then sure enough, things look pretty aggressive. So, if we hadn't gotten the blood test and then gotten on it at 50, you're like, whatever. Maybe you don't do it for 3 or 4 or 5 more years. I probably wouldn't have survived that. So,
Wow.
If it had been ignored for that much longer.
But you mentioned when we spoke before that that threw you into a mental turmoil. Did that bring different things into focus in your life as well?
Yes, exactly. And that's when things start to change. And then when you start looking at things like 2015 and this idea of through section hiking, it's like, which gave me some inspiration. But after 2017, I'm like, okay, I'm not a morbid person. I'm not pessimistic. I'm not fatalistic, but I'm realistic. And I know we all have a sort of a limited time on this
Sure.
on this planet. And I started thinking, this scare, shall we call it, put that into focus and say, whatever you want to do, and let's figure out how you're going to get there, right? And so it changed my mindset on the future, retirement, trying to figure out, what to do next, because rather than sitting around and waiting for the next part of your life and maybe it never comes and you never do what you want to do, figure out a way to get there. And so
you have to instigate it. You definitely have to instigate that next stage in your life. And it's not an easy thing to do sometimes, is it? When you're used to doing things in other ways. But that actually wasn't your turning point, was it? Your turning point was about 4 years later when your father did die also of cancer. So
that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that time, how that even more kick-started your desire to do this.
Yeah. Let me turn the clock back slightly. Dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he had been going downhill in various ways from about 2010 on. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's around 2014. And he had problems with his back, and my dad kind of shifted as he got older from the can-do guy. The guy could do everything, could fix everything, could make everything. He became that can't guy, right? And I'm sorry, Dad, to have to observe the negative parts of that as well. But it was really hard to watch a vibrant, sort of strong human being who started, he was giving it away, right? Emotionally, mentally, giving away his capacity, giving up, shall we say, long before his true physical capacity went away. And that started about 2010.
Did you ever ask him about that, by the way?
Oh, yeah. Dad was a bit of a hypochondriac, even when he was younger, when he was younger. And I would push him and I'd try to get him to do stuff. Sometimes his answer was like, I can't walk. Well, Dad, you can walk. Of course you can, but I didn't ask him, let's go for a hike in the woods. I said, let's go do X, right? And he became very much a sort of turning inwards and just.
It's easier to say no in that circumstance, isn't it?
Yes.
Much easier to say no. It's kind of shame, my dad never was. My dad was actually couldn't do anything when he was younger, but he could do a lot when he was older. So he kind of ran out of time, unfortunately. And I know that obviously that must have got you down. It got me down. I still think of my dad every day, 30 odd years later, my mum 40 years later. So, but you started looking for books to listen to, and you found Paul Stutzman's Hiking Through, which, by the way, was the one that absolutely turned me on to doing this trail in a big way.
Exactly. So I'll pull you back forward. Stop at 2019 for a second. We lost my sister-in-law to cancer in 2019. My brother's wife, youngish, I think she was 56. And then we lost Dad in the spring of 21 to brain cancer. So aside from the Parkinson's, which had been dragging him down, he was eventually diagnosed with a glioblastoma, brain cancer, and died in the spring of 2021, April of 21. In the fall of 21, I had been bike riding for exercise, and I was downloading audiobooks from the local library app, and I had a buddy of mine who was obsessed with the movie Appaloosa. It's a cowboy western movie. It's a fun movie, but neither here nor there. And I said, I'm going to look up the book. It's based on a book. And I typed in Appaloosa into the library app, and the first thing that came up was Hiking Through by Paul Stutzman, Appalachian Trail. Follow the APPA of Appaloosa. And I'm like, well, all of a sudden, how the fortuitous parts of the world all come together. I'd had it way in the back of my brain for years.
Trail magic.
It was trail magic multiplied by 1,000. And I looked at it, and not only was it the first thing that came up, it was available immediately to download as an audiobook, which isn't always the case. Sometimes you have to reserve it, and it takes a couple of weeks or a month or 2 or 3 to get a book out of the library app. I'm like, well, okay. So I clicked on Hiking Through. I didn't bother with looking any further for Appaloosa. And I spent the next, I think it's 15, 20 hours of audiobook listening to it. And it didn't take but an hour or two of listening to Paul Stutzman's hiking through to say, I'm going to do this. It just hit me like a lightning bolt. And Paul's story is very personal. He talks about the death of his wife from cancer,
Sure,
which, there was, the personal connections as well. I mean, not about my wife and that simply in that regard, but the idea that life turns on a dime and changes what you think is going to happen.
It sounds to me like it was the right book to read at that time in your life. You'd lost your father, you'd lost other members of the family as well, and you were listening to somebody and identifying what he was going through as well. I feel much the same way actually about that book as well.
Yeah, and fortunately, Paul's book is also well written, interesting.
Yeah, presents
a trail in a positive, fun light. I mean, he doesn't gloss over the difficulties. You don't go into it thinking that Paul had no issues. But if you want to read a book that's going to kind of inspire you to go do this, it's an excellent one to do so. And it started right there, planning. When I wasn't certain when it would be. I was thinking maybe in 26 I'd finally would retire.
Yeah, because the stars have to align. You can be as inspired as you like, but some people just can't do it at any time, can they? And certainly people who plan to do the who plan to do the Appalachian Trail in 2020 had their plans all thrown out because of obviously COVID and so on.
Exactly.
But for you, it had to be the right time. So had you been thinking of retiring early, or did the opportunity just come up to retire early?
In 21, we knew by then that we were probably going to retire by about 2026.
All right.
And so as soon as the idea of retiring kind of came together with the idea of doing the Appalachian Trail, then then it was clear that I could. My wife was on board, so could in the sense that, work commitments, life commitments, were all going to be able to be overcome at that point.
Sure.
And my wife was 100% on board. I started reading more books, podcasts, consuming as much of this material as I possibly could to, I even started collecting gear slowly at first. 21 becomes 22. In that spring of 22, I lost a really good friend to the same brain cancer that my dad died from at the age of 57-ish or so. Really crazy because I'd never heard of this glioblastoma before, and that happens to a good friend of mine. And then Mom dies in July of 22, and she was excited for me to go. Cancer as well. She was excited for me to go.
You know what? If you, I don't know whether you're a man of faith or not, but if you are a man of faith, I'm sure you think your parents know you're going and so on. Because I'm not a man of faith, I'm always so sad that my mum and dad and my brother missed me doing the Appalachian Trail, and I kind of wish I believed for that very purpose that they knew I was okay. I was always struggling with booze and drugs and stuff like that. And I think I'd like them to know that I was okay. In your case, are you partly, is one of your things for doing this is because your father went through a stage of actually not being able to do things, you don't want to be that I can't do it guy. You want to be the I can do it guy.
Absolutely. I mean, we've gotten forward mostly with inspiration, and now we talk a little bit about motivation,
sure.
Right? And that's one of the compelling motivations is not to age, is to age gracefully, shall we say, and not.
I don't know about that.
No, maybe not physically, right? I mean, but maybe mentally, right? Is to not give away those things, capacities that you should be able to do, not become the get off my lawn grumpy old man, not to do the things that keep you vibrant and part of society on a day-to-day basis. And that was not Dad. Like Dad in his later years became the I can't guy. I've got to be the I can guy. And so the Appalachian Trail is, to me, a challenge. It's something that I'm saying I can do it. I'm going to do it. Not, you don't look at that. And I know people my age and older going, oh, I could never imagine doing that. And the same comments you probably got all the time. It's like, and those are the I can't personalities, right? I'm not saying everybody should undertake this type of a journey, but the I can't personalities won't undertake even smaller journeys or smaller challenges. I've got to, and I want to be that I can guy. And that's inspiration and motivation a lot from Dad. Both from the person he was. Dad was the ultimate I can guy, right? That was the inspiration, and when he became the I can't guy, that becomes the motivation to not become that. Right? So it's kind of the yin and the yang of the same person.
Do you believe your dad knows you're going?
It's an interesting question because you describe yourself as not being a man of faith. I was raised a Catholic. I'm a man of some faith, but I'm not certain I believe in that sort of omniscient sort of sense that people pass to the next life and are watching us. I wish they were both here to know see me going.
Sure.
My mom knew I was going before she died, and she really liked the ideas. She would tell people about it. If she were alive, she'd be following me. She'd be listening to your podcast. So I wish they were both alive to hear it and see it. And even if I believe they can kind of sense the presence, and I hope and I wish they do, it's not the same because I can't share it with them, right?
Yes.
I can't. I can't call them from the trail, say, hey, we just did this and we just saw that. So it's difficult, but no more difficult than anybody else who's lost their parents and wishes they were around to see some major events in their lives. Of
course, I think I remember calling my son when I went to touch the sign first time, and I've probably told this before, but he would never call me Mighty Blue until I touched that sign, and then Fantastic. He called me Mighty Blue that day.
Fantastic.
It chokes me up about actually just thinking of it because he's since died, unfortunately. So it kind of chokes me up thinking about it. That he would never call me Mighty Blue until I actually got there. So that was quite something. Well, look,
I want to talk about one more point of inspiration and motivation.
Right.
And that inspiration and motivation is you, Mighty Blue.
Oh.
Yes, I want to do a shout out to Mighty Blue. You're both an inspiration to me. Having listened to your own tales of your journey in 2014, not having been a hiker, not having really done that much before, showing up, doing, having it change your life, create this wonderful media, this podcast that you still continue to today, which I've been listening to for a long time, and then to continue on and to do it again. In 2019, if that is an inspiration to all of us, and somebody, as you would even say, not in the bloom of youth. We're all at a
first flush,
first flush, whatever, however you'd put it. It's an inspiration to all of us, to get off the couch and do something, not just say, well, I'm X years old and those things are beyond me. You're still out there doing stuff. You've got your next journey coming up on the Camino again. That's an inspiration to all of us. And I take also the motivation. The podcast has been motivation, 100%. From the day I picked it up and started listening to it, I've read books from some of your guests. I love Gary Sizer's "Where's the Next Shelter?"
So do I. That's a great audio book, by the way. That's a really great audio book.
I think I read that one. I don't know.
Right. Okay.
I've read a few.
But
rather
Gary
than
reading
audiobook.
it is great. He's got some great accents for the people in it as well.
Fantastic. And as we've talked about, I preferred your reading of hiking through over the one that was available.
Don't tell anybody, but Stutzman told me that as well.
Okay, that's just between you and I.
Yeah, right. Now, anyway. One last thing I was going to actually mention. This is the motivation to do this hike. Do you think that you're going to be satisfied with I say justice hike? It's not justice hike, but once you're done, is there another chapter in your life you want to move on to that's different from hiking, or do you feel this will open up a whole lot more of long hikes?
I'm expecting that we'll get some more long hikes in the future. Whether it transforms into let's say a triple crown, I don't know. But I had a lot of ideas. I do want to do the Camino. My wife wants to do that with me as well.
Cool.
I want to do a few hikes in the UK. There's the Wainwright's Coast to Coast, which I'd love to try. Maybe the Southwest Coast Pass like you did. So whether we do another 2,000 mile plus hike, I'd like to think I will. Let's get through one, and then we'll see.
Yeah. Let's ask that question again once you touch the sign.
Exactly.
Well, look, great to catch up with you again. I'm glad you're really positive still. You've now only got about 3 weeks to go, so it's kind of counting down less than 3 weeks now, isn't it? It's
February 17th.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's coming. Within within 2 months, you'll be well into it. So
I know.
It's the way it goes. Well, look, great to catch up again, and we'll talk again next week.
All right. Thank you very much, Mighty Blue.
Hi, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
That last bit wasn't expected by me. He didn't need to say that, but I'm appreciative that he did. We all need to be inspired in our lives, and if some of what I put out each week has resonated with Dave, or indeed any of you, then I've done what I set out to do. And I'm sure Dave's folks will be proud of their boy. You're still their boy, even though you're in your 50s and your folks are gone. I think sons usually want to impress their fathers, and Dave articulated very well, I thought, how he didn't want to end up as the can't-do man. Rather, he wanted to be the can-do man. Now that's motivation for you. We've got 2 more chats before Dave heads out. Then we'll be hearing from Beth in her preparation. And talking about our class of 25, I am still trying to work out how to get those conversations when I'm out in Spain on my Camino in May. I'm pretty confident I can do it, but I haven't worked out the best way to get it all to you guys. Believe me, I will be trying everything I can before I go. But even if I can't make it work, I'll still be recording my thoughts from the Camino and putting out 2 episodes a week while I'm out there. Now, Emily tries to rid herself of one of her unwanted hiking companions. You know what, guys? We really should be doing better. I'll see you next week. 6 of us were in the 7:30 a.m. shuttle. We were all headed up Franconia Ridge, a 2-mile section of AT above treeline. 2 hiked on, while 4 of us started together. Why Not and me, joined by Mr. Peanut Butter and Iron Maiden. They were a young married couple who were so kind and humorous and a joy to be around. As we hiked, the gaps between us widened, and at times we played leapfrog as one of us would overtake the other while they were on a break. It made for a fun day. At one particular snack time, when I stopped for a rest, the ground was steep and covered in wet, mossy undergrowth. There was no suitable spot for hanging out. I decided to drop my pack and straddle it like a horse. I'd never sat on my pack before, but I'd seen other hikers do it all the time. It was quite comfy. I wasn't down for a few seconds when I heard bleep. Oh no, I just activated my SOS signal. Again, I didn't mean to do that. I frantically tried to cancel the call, but I could not see the screen. I unsuccessfully dug through my pack for my glasses. Thankfully, Mr. Peanut Butter came down the trail to my rescue and cancelled the SOS. About 10 minutes later, I heard a helicopter. No way, I thought. That can't be for me. It came to my location and then went away. A coincidence for sure, but one that had my heart pounding and kept Bruce on the lookout for a bill to arrive in the mail. The bill never showed up. I was glad the call didn't go through. I'd already sent one accidental SOS back at Neil Gap that had sent my family into a panic. I didn't want to do that again. Mr. Peanut Butter had come along at the perfect time. That was the last I saw of any hiking pals for a while. There was no more leapfrogging. I was worried about not seeing Why Not, but was so glad the gents seemed to be gone. I knew there was one more possible encounter with Appleton next time. Batman still had some of their gear they didn't want to carry. He had made arrangements to meet them at Crawford Notch to give it back to them the morning of August the 8th. I was also meeting Batman for a Nero Day to resupply for my traverse of the presidential range. It was a short 3-mile hike out from Ethan Pond campsite to the rendezvous spot. I hadn't seen the gents for a couple of days. I exited the woods into the parking area and proceeded to walk down the short, paved driveway to the US 302. I rounded the corner and could see the gents at the Batmobile with Bruce. I doubled back so they wouldn't see me and walked back to the trail where I tried to text Batman. No signal. Frantic, I didn't know what to do. I really couldn't handle seeing the creep again. He's winking, wanted to give hugs every time he saw me, and he's constant talking about how he loves his wife while wearing my patience thin. And dude, if you need to keep repeating how much you love your wife, then who are you trying to convince? Not me, maybe yourself. One of the last times we had hiked together, Apples was ahead several yards and next time was behind me. Out of the blue, he started telling me in graphic detail how he had told his son about the birds and the bees. It was quite uncomfortable and inappropriate. I tried to pretend to be interested. Sometimes on the trail, one must tread lightly. You're alone in the woods with people you hope you can trust. You need to be nice, hoping not to make them angry enough to want to hurt you. My tactic was to be nice, then avoid them by hiking off. I couldn't hike off just yet. I needed them to leave Batman, but I was afraid they were all waiting for me. As I sat on the verge of tears, another young hiker who I hadn't met before came strolling along. Relieved, I asked him if he had a minute. I explained to him what was going on a couple of 100 yards away. He agreed to secretly let Batman know I was there. The young hero and I walked together a few paces, then I dipped into the trees and hid. The message was delivered. The gents hiked on, and I made it to the car. Whew, I escaped that one. Batman and I could start my Nero day. So much for those plans. Little did I know that Batman had offered to take the gents' belongings to Gorham, where they would be staying in a few days. He didn't know what strong negative feelings I had about next time. Anyone reading my blog would have thought things were hunky-dory, but that's because I didn't want to offend Apples. He had given my blog address to his wife, and I was afraid if I wrote anything bad, it would get back to the creep. I didn't want to deal with that out on the trail. So my Nero day was spent riding in the car 2 hours to help someone who was annoying me and probably taking advantage of Batman's kindness. Bruce and I tried to focus on the fact that we were also helping Apples. After our goodwill delivery, Batman and I enjoyed some ice cream and a moxie before setting up our tent just in off of US 302. Pitching a tent so close to the high traffic areas is not recommended, but there wasn't enough daylight left to hike in farther. Batman was spending the night with me before he had to head off to work again. It was our routine. He met me to help resupply, then sent me off for a few days to hike north while he went to work. Pretty good partnership, I must say. Woohoo! I was sleeping single in a double tent. It was like the Taj Mahal. Of course, I'd rather be with Batman, but since he wasn't there, I was enjoying the extra space. I had started out 5 months before with a double tent by Hyperlite Mountain Gear. I loved the weight of it, and it didn't absorb moisture, but it didn't have enough headroom for me. There was plenty of space left to right and head to toe, just not enough space to sit up. I switched to a double Hubba Hubba by MSR, but then I wanted something lighter, so I switched to a single Hubba. I had more tents now than I had underwear for the hike. After being cooped up in the single for a while, I was back to the double. By now, I was as fit as a fiddle, and I didn't even notice the difference in weight when I went back to the two-person tent. The extra space was worth the extra weight. Extra space wasn't the reason I switched gear, though. My niece Stephanie was going to meet me to hike the presidential range. I told her I'd carry a tent for both of us. She was an experienced hiker and one of my biggest fans on this adventure. I was so happy to have the privilege of her joining me. Other friends had offered to meet me and I declined for a host of reasons, but I had no reservations about Stephanie tagging along. In fact, I'd encouraged it. The weather was starting to change. Early August in the mountains brought cooler temps. It was great for hiking and sleeping, but made setup, breakdown and snack time a bit chilly. At 3,800 feet, the cool morning air kept me in my cocoon a little longer than normal. I also chose to eat inside the hut. I had tented, but after a brisk time of packing away all my gear, my fingers were already a little numb. So, instead of eating breakfast as I hiked, I decided to take advantage of the warmth inside the hut. I was truly living in the moment. Sleeping in and eating before I hiked were things I rarely did, but on this morning I did both. The door to the hut hadn't even closed when I saw Maps and Moxie in the dining room, packing up their gear. It was meant to be. The trail will provide. We had communicated with each other, trying to meet up, but with lack of cell service in the region and schedules being so different, we never made a connection. But now, here we were, together by chance. Or was it? Just the day before, Bruce and I had said a prayer for my safety. The Presidential Range is the longest above tree-line section of the entire AT. It includes Mount Washington, where the worst weather in the world has been recorded. Some people would call my meeting with Maps and Moxie a coincidence. Others would say it was luck. I think it was maybe a little of both and a whole lot of faith. After our very excited reunion, we got busy checking the weather. A storm was coming in, which meant I had to make a quick decision. Do I keep my plans to meet Stephanie to do the Presidential Range in 2 days, or do I put on my big girl boots and do the range in 1 day to beat the storm? The three of us decided it would be safer to traverse the presidentials as quickly as possible and avoid bad weather. That meant I needed to contact Steph, and cell service was spotty at best. Little miracle number 2, I was able to get a call out to her. Stephanie was able to adjust her arrangements also. So Maps, Moxie and I hiked off to tackle the presidential range in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Up, down, over, up, down and over we went. The AT didn't actually summit all the peaks. Instead, the trail skirted most of the summits. Stephanie joined us on top of Mount Washington. It was a great meeting place. We waited inside the visitor centre and had hot food. While we were there, we ran into other hikers. Why Not, Iron Maiden and Mr. Peanut Butter were also there. I didn't know what was more amazing, the incredible endless views the presidential range offered us, or the serendipitous way we were all reconnecting. Once again, we girls, 4 in number now, went up, down and over. Stephanie was a peak bagger, so she would blue blaze to the summits and meet us at the Northern Trail Junction. We finally made it to Madison Springs Hut, between Mount Adams and Mount Madison, the last peaks in the range. Stephanie had attempted Mount Madison in the past and, for whatever reason, wasn't able to add it to her accomplished 4,000-footer list. With the change of plans and worsening weather, she, too, had to make a decision whether to continue north with us to claim Madison's summit, then hike back down and out her exit trail alone and in the dark, or to leave Madison again for another day. We all have to make choices in life. Sometimes you have to buck up and go for it, and sometimes you have to know when to say, not today. For Stephanie, Madison would have to wait. Maps, Moxie and I would continue north without her, but we were 3 strong and didn't have as far to go. The White Mountains are not to be toyed with, and it takes a strong person to put safety over pride. Madison's summit was one of my favourites on the hike up to this point. When Stephanie finally is able to claim her prize, it will be one worth waiting for. After goodbyes, Stephanie went her way and we went ours. Madison Springs Hut sat at the base of Madison Peak. We had no problem scrambling the half-mile, 600-foot elevation gain to the marker sign. As much as we would have loved to have stayed and enjoyed the sunset, we needed to make tracks and get back down to the tree line. There was a campsite 3 miles from the hut, so we knew we would be doing good just to make it back down to the safety of the trees. The 1-mile descent back to the dwarfed spruce trees gave us little hope of finding a place to set up for the night. We were still at about 4,800 feet elevation, losing daylight with every second as well as our stamina. We passed one spot right next to the trail that was not even large enough for 2 tents, let alone 3. The trees were barely 7 feet tall and about the diameter of baseball bats. The ground was steep and rocky. We had almost given up hope of stealthing when something to my left caught my eye. There was a different feel to the surroundings. I stopped and concentrated my sight to the west of the trail, and 20 yards away through the toothpick forest was a small clearing. A not-so-visible trail led to the clearing. It was such a tight squeeze through the path that we had to take our packs off and carry them in front of us so we wouldn't snag them on the branches. Once inside the clearing, we had the most perfect spot a tired hiker could ask for. It was flat, rock-free, and had room for 2 tents. Maps and Moxie doubled up, and I enjoyed another night in my Taj Mahal. A 2,000-mile through hike offers many experiences, some good, some great, some bad, and some you wish never happened. As wonderful and or not so wonderful the memories are, it is impossible to remember every detail. But I will always remember my 13.5-mile traverse of the Presidential Range with Maps, Moxie and Stephanie from the moment I walked into Mizpah Hut to the last ray of sunlight before I closed my eyes in our hidden sight among the dwarf trees high in the sky. We may have been below tree line, if you can call it that, with the trees barely reaching over our heads, but we still had 6 miles of hiking to get to Pinkham Notch before the storm. We rallied early, beating the sunrise. We were not messing around. We wanted off the mountain before any rain hit. It was a trail that seemed to never end. I don't know if it was because we were tired, if it was the challenging ground, if it was the stress of beating the precipitation, or a combination of all the factors, but the trail seemed to go on and on and on. We were elated when the path dumped us behind the visitor centre at Pinkham Notch, and even more excited as we stepped under the porch and the heavens erupted without warning, unleashing a torrential downpour. Not one drop touched us. Again, we lived in the moment. Maps, Moxie and I did a little dance and shouted out. Bystanders looked at us strangely, but we didn't care. We had just spent the last 26 hours pushing ourselves to the limits over some pretty spectacular terrain, testing our endurance, determination and will. We felt like we had won the Olympics, only in this case, we all stood on the winner's platform.